Great. So hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for joining. Should we just do like intros or something with everybody since we're all here together?
Yeah.
You have a check-in, Shey?
Let's see. Well, I like this one. If you were a plant, what plant would you be? What plant do you feel like today?
I'll go first. I'm Eliza, she, her pronouns. I am helping out with Design by RI, helping out with Design Week. It's been an awesome week meeting designers and people throughout the state. If I were a plant, I had a conversation with someone who described the population like the sensitive plant that retracts when you touch it. And it was just such a great image in terms of like personality. So I don't know if I'm the sensitive plant, but I love that image as like a way of describing reactions. I'll hand it off to Judy.
That's great.
So Eliza, you must know Devin then, Devin Samuels, who's kind of like a nephew to me. So I, want to support him in doing this. I'm not a design person. I don't know anything about it. And this was the one workshop that I could understand and that, appealed to me just around my general social justice goals. And I would say, knowing nothing about plants, that I want to be a sunflower.
Love sunflowers.
Hi, I'm Soleil Ming, pronouns she, her, and I'm a first-year architecture grad student at RISD. And I just saw, the prompt for this conversation, and I just thought that would be a really great thing to, layer onto my studies and learn more about. And if I were a plant, I feel like today I would be a pothos, just a classic house plant. Yeah.
I love it.
Cool, I'll go now. And then Shey, you can close us off. It's your question. Vatic, he, him, his pronouns. I'm a co-director for a MoralDocs project with Shey Rivera Ríos. And if I was a plant today, I'm thinking something that's dormant, something that's just asleep right now. It's closed up. So there's this plant called the resurrection plant. And when you put water on it, it blooms and opens up. And so I'm it all balled up, curled up right now. That's kind of how I feel if I could be a plant today. So that's why it's good to have a small group, even though, it's an infinite number of people watching this in the future. So
that's right.
That's amazing. So I'll pass it to you, Shey.
I love that. Cocooning, you're cocooning. The sensitive plant is really funny. So in Puerto Rico, there's tons of them. We call them moribibi, and you touch them and they close, but they have thorns on their spine. So if you step on, it's like running around barefoot, you have to watch out for the moribibi because then you can step on them and they would, pierce you. So it's one of my favorite plants, actually, Eliza. Today I'm trying to think. I also feel like a house plant. I feel like I'm just trying to extend my tentacles. So maybe, I don't know what they're called, but they're purple. They have small leaves and they just are kind of like vines. I forgot the name, but I feel like a vine. I'm just Soleil,
the string of hearts, right? They're purple on the bottom, green on the top, and they just kind of trail off.
Wow, that's even nicer than a string of hearts. Yeah, so I feel like that's beautiful. Yeah, just making a new home, nesting in a new place. Oh, we have another person, Jolie. Welcome. We're just doing intros. Would you like to introduce yourself? Actually, I didn't finish. So I'm Shey Rivera Ríos, co-director with Vatic on the MoralDocs project, and I use they, them pronouns. Inviting Jolie if you would like to introduce yourself with your pronouns and what kind of plant you feel like.
Wow, what kind of plant I feel like? Oh my God. Okay, well, that one I'm going to start with. I'm from Los Angeles, so I'm going to go with a cactus. And yes, so I'm Jolie, and I go by she, her, hers. And I'm so excited about this presentation. Started Pop-Up Roadie. I don't know anything else.
That's it. That's great.
Okay, great.
I love cacti. Awesome. So we have a small group today. Thank you so much. I think it's going to be really nice for us because both Vatic and I are a little bit low energy, but we're going to show up with the brilliance of what this project is and excited to share with you. So let me pull up. Vatic, do you want to just talk a little bit about the work while I'm pulling up the presentation?
Sure, I could just talk a little bit about the impetus for the creation of MoralDocs as a project. And Shey and I have a working relationship and a friendship ever since Shey was co-director, or even a little bit before that, co-director of AS 220, and I was working in the youth program there. And I started out in my artistic practice as a rapper, and moved from like rapping to like writing plays, and then some of the work that I was doing like as a youth organizer, moving that into like doing facilitation. And so Shey and I were like starting to build like a working relationship doing facilitation around certain issues. So like we did work with the Boston around their building emissions performance standards. And this was all happening in a time as like COVID was really taking its grasp and like holding on to folks, as well as what they called the uprising, the racial reckoning was happening after what happened with with all the different names. Like I just don't want to like start naming names, but like with all of that. And so like we were all in the middle of that. We are activists at heart. And I reached out to some folks that I knew with the organization known as PRISM, and they were doing a lot of work around like defunding the police. And so I just like reached out and was like, what can I do to help? And Justice Gaines, who's a poet friend of mine, she just put me in contact with Vanessa, who's the co-director Maldonado over there. And they were like, we're doing this work, but we really need help talking with people about what reimagining looks like and what redistribution looks like. And so could you hold these conversations and like really start to hold that for us? So Shey and I got together and we started to do a series of community conversations. And from those community conversations, we had over 200 people fill out surveys around how they wanted to redistribute the $88 million of the Providence police budget. And as we were doing that work, the city, the Arts, Culture, and Tourism of the city, as well as Healthy Communities Office, came to us because the city of Providence was being pushed and actually got a donation from an angel donor to do some work looking at the city's budget to do exactly that. But as they were looking at the budget, the way that they were looking at it they were just strictly looking at the budget, not looking at what to do with the money or like how to redistribute it, just looking at what the inefficiencies were. And so they were like, shouldn't we have someone like with community connection and some vision to like reimagine what this work would look like? And so they talked with Shey and I, and we started to work and birth out this project of MoralDocs. And so I'm gonna pass it to you, Shey, to like round that out and talk about what MoralDocs is.
Yeah, thank you, Vatic. So like Vatic said, we met years ago, and not only working in facilitation, but also creative collaboration and organizing together. So I'm originally from Borikén, Puerto Rico, and moved here in 2010. And that's when I started my trajectory at AS 220, and that led to me meeting Vatic as well and collaborating there. So I wanted to just share with you some of the work that we did based on this idea of how can we use art and culture and storytelling to really get this message out into our communities in a meaningful way. And like, Vatic shared the Boston example of how with that, it was like the design process of a city ordinance. Can y'all hear me okay? My Wi-Fi is a little bit broken. Great. So it was the design of a city ordinance, but with the residents most impacted. And Vatic as an arts facilitator, and I as like co-producer, like project manager of the work with One Square World. So similar, in a similar spirit, MoralDocs was using the community stories, right, of the people most impacted by these systems in order, like treating that as the lived experience and the knowledge that we need to build from there. Because oftentimes people make decisions without having those lived experiences. So I'm gonna share with you, I'm gonna share screen. I'm gonna stop my own video so that y'all can see. So this is the entry point of the website. And Vatic created an incredible script that really positions us in this conversation to look at what is possible. Sometimes in these conversations, the limit is the problem, but what we decided to do was, wait, you're sharing, I'm sharing my desktop, yeah? Jeez, my God. All right, let's do this. Let's see if it works this time. Great, it works now, yeah? Amazing. So the script that Vatic created, and I'll pass it off to you in a little bit, Vatic, so you can tell us about the story. The setting is Roger Williams Park. So the intention, specifically a temple of music, and the intention was to get us outside of just talking. We're obviously looking at the problems, right? And how inefficient public safety is for our communities, the way that it's been structured for years, where it's, only serving to uphold oppressive systems, to criminalize people of color and support white supremacy, and what it would look like to envision a Providence in 2040, where we would be nurturing our communities and taking care of them, prioritizing their health and well-being instead. And that as a specific, response to how the City of Providence builds their budget, where the two departments that have the highest investment are the public schools, and right underneath that, the police department. Then after fire, and then the rest of the public services have an incredibly contrasting, like there is like the level of investment is massively different. So the police budget was proposed to be 88 million, while like things like art, culture, and tourism, housing, wellness for our communities, mental illness, all these things were receiving maximum, between 2 million to like $300,000, something really ridiculous. So what would it look like to invest all those resources into nourishing and preventing, all these social problems that take place in our community, right? So anyway, this is the entry point. We decided to turn it into a transmedia story. So what does that mean? It means it's just multimedias, right? If we think about community storytelling, it's like we need to talk to people in different ways. People communicate in different ways, and artists express themselves in different ways, and designers too. So transmedia is just basically using different storytelling techniques. And then you can sign up to see the episodes. But what the project in its core is a virtual reality film that Vatic and I produced with about, maybe 25 artists, local artists and community leaders in our city who have been, in relationship to this topic in one way or another. So Vatic worked with a group of co-writers, Justice Gaines, Charlotte Abatzi, and Susie Santana, who are well-known poets and advocates of so many different community needs and causes. And they wrote a script that was led by Vatic. And then in my piece was to support the planning of the visual aspect of the work and the filming and production, although it was also in collaboration with Vatic, very much so. So we worked with a collaborator of Vatic, Julia Liu, as a director, and her partner, Keith Hayward. And Keith was really the person who was instrumental in helping us set this up as virtual reality. Why did we choose virtual reality as a medium? Because it is an exciting new technology that should be more accessible to folks, right? This is a photo of the co-writers in the meantime. So virtual reality is a medium that is right now, can be more accessible, and we're thinking about the lived experience of folks. So we wanted to put people in the shoes of folks that were dreaming and envisioning an abolitionist future, a future of community nurturing. So let me just show you really quick. So why we talked, Vatic, do you want to talk a little bit about why it's called MoralDocs, and then a little bit about the script?
Sure. So when we were doing those community meetings, a quote came up as we were showing the budget. So like when we were doing the community meetings, we would show the budget and we'd have someone present that, and then we'd have the group reallocate money from the budget. And something that came up for somebody in the conversation was they said that like looking at the budget, it reminded them of this quote that sometimes is like attributed to Dr. King. And the quote is that a budget is a moral document. And so like using that as a concept and as a basis for the project and all the other different things that we would create together. So we created surveys, we created a toolkit, we created a new structure for like what it could look like in the future. Like, so we created all these different things, and those things living in this moral document package. And so that's really what the name of it comes from. And then like diving into like talking about the story piece of it, the idea for the story was to like really dig in and to imagine a future where we don't have policing as an occupation or as like an actual thing. And like that for me was like probably like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, that would be like really scary. Like the idea of abolition was like a really scary thought for me. And oftentimes like when we were going into these conversations, we were bumping into people's fear. And something that was really important for me in my like understanding was to understand history. So a lot of the fear I had came from misunderstanding history. So when we would do these conversations, we would walk people through the history. And so like in walking through the history and understanding that, using the history as like a map to like look at the future and to vision the future. And so with the future project, the Temple of Music being like a centerpiece of like community engagement, and people go there to like picnic and different things like that, thinking if this Temple of Music could be a space that a future group of people who would be nurturing our community could use that as a space to learn and connect with each other, as well as connect with history. And so like, that's really what the script came from. So the idea is that there is a group of cadets who are like the first cohort of cadets going through this type of training to be a part of the city's community health justice department. And so like these are the actors who played these different parts, and each of the different characters take on a different role in a different department that would be in this department of community health justice. So you have a health justice department, you have an environmental justice department, you have an office of housing, so there are these different departments and different offices that we know are like the foundation for like a lot of the tensions and a lot of the preventable death. So I was getting really obsessed in my artistic visioning and stuff like that with the idea of preventable death, like being in the middle of COVID-19 and like not even having a word for a group of doctors or nurses, right? Like everybody's like an army of nurses or army of doctors. Like there's no real good metaphor even for fighting, like it's all war, it's all militarized. And so we have right now, there's like over 400 police officers in the city, which means there are 400 guns, on our street. And the number one cause of death, but in the United States is heart is heart disease, right? And number 2 is cancer. And right now, number 3 is COVID-19. And so like none of them can be killed with a gun. And so just thinking about that and like really diving into that was like the impetus for creating the script. And as Shey was saying, we wanted to like we wanted to utilize stories and experience in the community and uplift that in the future. So these cadets are learning from things that are happening here in our present. And as they're learning from it, they're actually experiencing it in a space like people may have seen Star Trek or like watch like, you know what I'm saying, X-Men, it's like the Danger Room or the holodeck. So they're in something similar to that in the Temple of Music, but then the characters who are experiencing it, they actually become the characters and are actually, you know, feeling the harm in a real type of way. And that's just like a metaphor for saying that we need to have people who are nurturing and like going around and like being these gardeners in our communities that are actually connected to their humanity and connected to the humanity of others. And white supremacy, it strips us of that, right? It tells us to be professional. It tells us that we, you know what I'm saying, we can't show up like ourselves and be low energy. You know what I'm saying? We always have to be prepared in these different things, right? And so like that's a lot. Those are a lot of words of saying like where the script came from. And but yeah, I'll pass it back to Shey to like kind of add on to like how, I guess, like how we brought it together and pulled it together in the artistic piece.
Yeah, thank you, Vatic. I'm gonna share screen again. So yeah, I'm gonna just leave it like this, even if it's imperfect. So we had a team of amazing people involved. We pulled, so like we did first, the script was the first part, and Vatic co-led that with the writers. We hired Vanessa Flores Maldonado and Victoria Benson as 2 consultants. Vanessa on the community organizing and public safety piece, or community safety piece, and then Victoria Benson on the health justice piece. And then we also, you know, looked for a slew of amazing actors that we have locally and worked with the filmmakers. So everything from live actors to also voice actors, because we included animation in this work as well. We really wanted this to be a very joyful representation of the future without like, you know, whitewashing the problems. Like it's centering the problem, centering the community voice, but also painting the possibilities. And, you know, like I feel like a lot of my work, and I think at this point, Vatic, a lot of your work too, is along the lines of solar punk, where it's like, what are the solutions for our future, not just staying in the dystopia. And we also hired Maria Fong as the lead animator. Maria and I worked together. So she did most of the animations and I complemented them with digital animation as well. And then we had Julio Veroa, who we contracted. Julio is an incredible 3D artist, and they produced our key time chariot, which I'll show you. It's like a beautiful 3-dimensional space that you climb into, and that's where this vessel takes you to Providence in 2040. And then Tracy Johnson Lavoy and Angel Lavoy were the sound designers who did incredible work. And we had a bunch of incredible musicians like Iris Creamer or Aura Moreno and Angel Newman, as well as Julio. And this was a really important work. You know, the art project is a container for these stories and case studies of the lived experience of our community. And also Vatic, myself, Vanessa, and Victoria sat down with the city and their consultants that were doing all this financial analysis. And this is informed by that, you know, what they found and what they did not find. So a lot of the data that's not being collected. And we decided to this is basically an attempt to connect how public safety or community safety is entirely connected to the health of our community, behavioral health, well-being. So that was in relationship to the Healthy Communities Office. And yeah, we presented the strategies. So, you know, everything from like our practices as arts facilitators involve building of community altars or having ritual space or space of healing. That was present in our creative process to make this work. And, you know, I love this quote from James Baldwin: history is not the past, it's the present. We carry our history with us. We are history. Because one of the things that Victoria Benson brought was this idea of cells to systems, right? like how racism and violence gets, embedded in our bodies and passed down through our DNA. So, we can talk a little bit more about that. Vatic can share a little bit later if y'all are interested. But this is the time chariot that Julio created with us. We really wanted this idea of like, working class car that was like just completely covered with, flora and fauna and grass and crazy flowers and everything. This actually came from an idea of a previous piece that Vatic did at the Decameron Providence, where he set up multiple Zoom screens and invited people in. This was a theatrical, it was like a live performance piece where he set up altars and an altar space that was a time capsule, and then had Zoom screens, and also these, specifically the car rugs, right? The rugs of an old car that you were growing sod, and just that beautiful imagery of like what we leave behind, but it's taken over by nature and it can become something beautiful. So we really want that to be the time chariot. What we create is part of nature and is going to lead us to liberation. So here are some of the photos. We did this whole, Julio did an amazing job with this piece and basically made our dreams come true. So the story starts off, we are in this time chariot in the moon, and you see the galaxy, you can look around you, and then you come in and you're welcomed by the AI interface Gladys. And this interface basically, takes you in the time chariot to Providence in 2040, where we land in the Temple of Music. And that's where we get to be witnesses of the story of these cadets graduating from the first community health justice program led by Dr. Viola Taylor, who is the professor who actually used to be a cop and found liberation and a different way of being and wanted to create the school to be an alternative so that we can focus on community well-being. So, these are the folks, Jackie Davis, Becky Bass, Shaphanie Terrell, Ron Lewis, and Phoenix Williams, incredible local actors and directors and choreographers as well. These are some photos of our fun film days, and also the final altar moment where the class graduates. That's the story has 4 episodes, and the last episode they're graduating in a community altar. These are some of the images of the animations, because every time, like Vatic mentioned, we're basically witnessing some of their classes. And when they engage in a class, Viola opens up with very big concepts of, what it looks like to protect our communities. What are those tools and frameworks? And then they go visit a story of one of the community members. And those stories are in animation. But you'll see in this one, it's an orientation training. So it starts off with a practice that, Vatic, also, you bring this a lot in your own facilitation trainings, the idea of the babies coming down the river. So here are some snapshots of the cadets becoming animation and engaging in this orientation of saving these babies, and then talking about the roots and the root cause of, structural violence. Not just like becoming, having quick fixes or quick solutions and reacting, just looking at what are the main causes. I'll leave it at that so you can actually watch and see what I mean when we explain this. And then you'll see this as Providence, the skyline and the river and everything. I'll show you a couple more. So these are glimpses from episode 2. So Fire on the Street Named Heaven. So this is the story that deals with a house fire and how community members bumped into that and actually were the ones to support the families that were inside this house while they waited for fire, which was a very long wait. And it was an opportunity to talk about how, honestly, sometimes community response is really what gets people to safety instead of our, whatever systems that we have in place that are actually not that efficient. But this was animation by Maria Fong and myself. Maria doing paper cutting and stop motion, and myself doing digital illustration and some of the digital animation here too. And part of the work, that's one of the episodes. There's another one called, we call it the Halo story, but it's what is the actual name of I was we could talk about it as the Halo story, but it is the story of a community member here that actually went through, domestic partner violence and had a pretty awful, way of engaged with the resources that were available in a way that were not helpful to her, that were actually very harmful to her and her child. So I don't know if you want to speak to the 2 episodes, Vatic, or if we can just leave it at that and people can view them and tell us what they think, but feel free to chime in.
No, I think that was great. Thanks, Shey. I guess I could talk a little bit about it. And then if people have like questions, I think that would help generate more for me. But like, as you were talking, it was generating a lot. But yeah, those 2 stories are based off of interviews that we did with community members here. We used the story to basically we used the basics of their story to like really just like to show the reality of how these systems have failed and how there are systems that are at play to support each other. So with the Halo story, or when a call for help turns violent, that story is, it's just like a heartbreaking story. And we tried our best to like bring it to light, but then have it in a way that can like show the positivity, because this person, she's so amazing and so powerful as she like shares her story, and the ability for her to like come to community and community to come around her and to like bring her story to life and to like bring her to where she is right now, from where she was, is just like an amazing story. But in the midst of it, the way she talks about it, she really did not see any other solution to like the domestic violence situation that she was in, but to call, like she was getting calls from a domestic abuse partner that helps with like women's issues and things like this. And they were like, yeah, we can help you, just come to the office. And then when she shows up at the office, they're like basically talking about like committing her, right? And she's like, well, I have kids, like I can't do this. But they're using terms like going on vacation. And she's like so smart and so funny. She's like, I don't want to go on a vacation unless there's daiquiris, unless there's, there's margaritas, I can't do it. And she's like, can I leave? And they were like, yeah, you can leave. But as she was leaving, it was in the police complex. And so one of the people just, one of the women she was talking to was just like told the police like, hey, don't let her go. And then so a bunch of men grab her and she ends up like, fighting back and like, and being separated from her child, and it's just like, it's an extremely painful story about a person who had already suffered, a horrific, like violent situation in her family, then to go ask for help and then to be reintroduced into violence. And it just, like there's so many different quotes, but like, something that like basically the idea that sticks out to me on that story is just like how underreported, abuse is, right? Intimate partner violence is underreported because people don't want to go to the police, right? They already know that they're going to, like it's not going to help. Like she talks about it. She's like, I knew it was going to help, but I didn't know what else to do. And so I think that is like the biggest impetus, like to like do this work in the right way, to spend the money in ways so that people can get the supports that they need and be in connection in the proper way. So, just kind of want to leave, I guess, that part there on that story. And like, we can share links with people to like, those different art things. But yeah, Shey, if you want to talk about like this art piece and like how we wanted to leave that story, that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you. Part of the work was like the artwork, making sure to honor that story, like Vatic said, in a way that was healing and helping to transform. So Maria Fong created these really beautiful, like watercolor, like moments of, the script, the narration of the house, Halo being in her room, her child being in school, the teacher calling, and then Halo coming back home. But then also like reconnecting with her child and like, making a commitment of being together, and just like it really using the artwork as a place of love to hold this story. So, you'll see here, like the child made a little drawing of a phoenix, and this idea of the resilience of our communities, the resilience of women of color, of Black women, is very present in here. And it's like we see them, together, like flying a kite is like a very powerful, I feel, very powerful symbol of that together here. Yeah, and that's how we close it at the end of so the story, the MoralDocs story, is 4 episodes. The first one is the orientation. Second one is the fire, a street named Heaven. Second one is the Halo story, when a call for help turns into violence. And then the last closing is the ritual and celebration, and people can experience this work. It's all on YouTube, and we're launching the next few episodes. The first episode is launched, so you can see that in the MoralDocs webpage. And we're adding the next 3 episodes very soon, in the next few days. And you can get to experience that. You can use it on YouTube and drag and drop, or you can also use it on a phone, on a headset, and just be immersed in the world. And we really wanted to do that just to show also what is possible in the Providence community of artists. Like, we're all local artists, extending our platform, our work in really deep ways, not only with community, but also with technology and design. So yeah, but I'll leave it at that. Would love to hear if you have questions about our process, about the ways in which we engage with community and how we kept the integrity of the stories. Whatever comes to mind for you, just this is the space for the next 15 minutes. Thank you. We can make some noise too. Woo! Hey!
It's really cool. It looks so cool and so powerful, and just that vision of what a future, almost like Department of Well-being, what is it, community health? I forgot what you're calling it, the academy, but they're like community well-being in a real way. And just the concept is just really cool, that it already exists. You're creating it, that it already exists, and that to me is very hopeful and inspiring.
Thank you. Yeah, Vatic.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that was like kind of the theme, is like things already exist, like people are already taking care of their community. It's like when the character Halo, when she's not able to pick up her children, like there is a system set up to help do that. So it's like her mother is there to help her and to support her, right? There's family. It's like there's a fire happening, and maybe the fire alarm doesn't go off, but there's a community person driving by and they saw the fire, so they wake everybody up in the house and get everybody, get everybody dressed and get them out the house. And so community is there to take care of each other. And the thing that isn't there at this exact moment is resources. The resources are actually going to do things that the city doesn't actually need, right? And so that was one of the things we had doing the artistic process. We were doing a collaborative process at the exact same time, a simultaneous process, looking at the budget with PFM, and they were doing all the numbers and looking at the different calls for service. And so it's of the top calls for service, right? The FBI has this thing they call type 1 crime or something like this. And those are things like assault or, murder, or things like that, right? And of the top 10, 15 calls that Providence had, none of them were of crime. Right, part 1 crime, right? So the most calls are for, the arrests are for people driving without a license. So the police actually spend more than double the time on going to false alarm calls in the city of Providence, more than half the time on false alarm calls than for part 1 crime, right? So basically we're paying people to go to like if like a retail store has a burglar alarm go off in the middle of the night, right? We're paying for that and not paying for the things that we actually need. And like that is something that, like when we're talking about systems, like that is the thing that I think is the biggest broken piece.
And I'm not very savvy about electoral politics, but you know, I know we're going to have a mayoral election in Providence next year, and somehow it would be neat to get the candidates seeing and talking about this kind of stuff.
Absolutely, we need that to happen. If you know, Judy, how we can do that and get help doing that, that'd be amazing, because they need to listen to these stories and inform the decisions.
Well, does anybody on the call already know Nirva, who's running, Nirva LaFortune?
Yeah, so we hosted one of the community forums with her and with other folks, the council people for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a relationship also with Gonzalo Cuervo from the
Oh, great.
Latina community, but that's a great idea. Yeah, I mean, our hope was to impact the city budget this year, and then things continue to happen, but we're not giving up because this work is not short-term, right? It's like long-term. Prison has been doing this work for a long time. So that's an excellent point, Judy. Thank you.
And the other thing is I attend the meetings. Is anybody else here attending the meetings of the African American Ambassador Group that Mayor Lurza put together for his Truth and Reconciliation Project and reparations? And they have an arts subcommittee. So I'm thinking if you're not connected to them, and actually the AAAG is going, I think, to the City Council tomorrow to present their ideas for how to use the COVID recovery money. And some of it is, I wish it's direct, it's not your concept. I wish it were your concept, but it is the concept of, putting more money towards housing and public health and arts and youth and, things that are connected. I think the hearing's at 1:00 if anybody wants to go tomorrow, City Hall.
Cool. I have so much to say about that, but I'm not going to say all of it. But yeah. I will say that, like, with design processes, it's like the AAAG is an attempt at collaborative governance. And I think that, sometimes when you do something at first, it may not be, your intention may not be like the result that you're looking to have. And so I think I'm excited about like the next iterations of that work as people continue to like build out that process, and that hopefully at some point the AAAG becomes a group that is autonomous and doesn't have to go to city council to have money. They already have money allocated to them, and the community is actually making decisions. So yeah, thank you for sharing those things.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, thanks for uplifting that. There's a lot of really great things happening in our city. Still a lot of work to do to get the structures to work how they should. Like Vatic was saying, like actually have community controlled resources is a big part of this. Yeah. Cool. So late.
Yes, I guess kind of a general question. As someone who's new to the Providence community and like really just now kind of getting my foot in the door and understanding everything that's happening here, what's a good way for someone new to the community to like start getting involved and like seeing and understanding everything? I find that it's kind of hard being here like alone and then just coming to school, and there's this whole institution here, but it's sometimes it feels disconnected from the rest of the Providence community, right?
Yeah, absolutely. 100% it's disconnected. Feel like, I used to work at ACE to 20, and like one of the things I was like, we tried to be intentional about cultivating relationships with all the colleges, RISD, Brown, Rick, and Johnson and Wales, Rhode Island College, all of them. But there's so much. Well, first off, like they keep you all like kidnapped. I'm just gonna call it. You get so much work. The capacity of the students is so low. So it's like, it would be interesting if like they figured out different ways to make that space intentional for students. I know the Swearer Center has contributed a lot in that regard, but just like showing up and coming to events and getting to know people and letting people know that there are skills that they can tap into you for support. But I think oftentimes the beginning of that is just like connecting to folks and just showing up to their events. Sometimes people bombard. One of the things that happened too, like not only with arts organizations, but like social justice organizations, is that every so often there's like clusters of or waves of people coming to them and asking, what can I do for you? And it can be overwhelming because they're also very, low capacity. But just showing up to the things that they already have set in place, like open houses or community convenings, or even like a lot of folks do like community cookouts or picnics just to come and get to know folks. Sister Fire is a really great organization as well that does justice circles every month. So people just come through and share their experiences. So that's a great way, Soleil, because it's a domino effect. Like once you start getting to know the community, then, people get to know you too, and they'll continue to build with you. So that's a good start.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I always encourage people to start with, because I do workshops, and people are sometimes asking, as a white person, what can I do about anti-racism, or, how do I start building these relationships? And I always suggest that they start with whatever their interests are. It's like, the best kind of exercise to do is the kind that you like, that you're actually going to do. And so, Soleil, so I'm just curious. I want to welcome you to Rhode Island, and and ask what you're studying here and what your interests are, because if it's singing, somebody might have an idea around that. If it's fishing, somebody there'd be other people to connect with.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And I mean, most of my work right now, like you were saying, my capacity, like most of it is taken up with architectural studies, right? And
Right.
but just kind of on the side, I do illustrations. I do little watercolor, acrylic illustrations. I've actually worked on this children's book called Madagascar from A to Z, and it was a collaboration between a classmate of mine and a professor, and we were basically working. The idea was using education as a way to promote conservation. So a lot of the things like we talked a lot, it was a course on conservation in Madagascar, and we talked a lot about, outsiders coming in and like trying to conserve these plants and animals without regards for the community or the people that are already living there. And so my classmate and I just felt that like, education would be the most, I guess, least harmful way of promoting conservation. So we did this whole project, and my interests generally lie within conservation, but in a way that's sustainable, and also just illustration and of course architecture.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like we definitely need more representation of folks with like architecture background and those fields involved with community organizers, especially as we're like, there's a affordable housing crisis that we're going through. And then also this city is very resourceful and there's like so much happening, but also there is a big gap between the decision makers doing urban planning and folks on the ground who have been doing this work for a long time to get community members to be the decision makers. I feel like Vatic's work, a lot of our work together actually is about that, like Vatic for longer. And then I did a pivot to make sure that the artwork has an outcome that is aligned with community. And, so it's a great time, Soleil. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great. I think that's one of my issues with architectural schools sometimes is that like we have a lot of focus on design and form and the built environment, but then it doesn't connect to the ground level, right? It doesn't connect to the community, in a direct way.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's true. Absolutely true. And I mean, this is something worth digging into, but in the City of Providence's webpage, you can see the different committees that they have. Like one of them is the design review committee, which I sit in. It was a mayoral appointment, but like it needs to be more open. Literally, I'm the only person of color. And I'm one out of, I think well, I think there's queer representation, but definitely I'm the only person of color there, and that needs to change. Like at this point, this city should not have tables that are only white folks and or people with very traditional experiences and backgrounds. Like we need folks that have lived experience in there making decisions. So thinking about that as a place to start too, of just getting to know those folks. And another thing that in relationship to like community building is just, this is a very accessible city. So for all of us, it's like reaching out to folks and asking people out to have some coffee and see what they're up to and what their work is. Being curious is always like, most of the time is a compliment and really nice for people to like care about what you do. So that's an invitation to just reach out to folks and invite them in, and ask them about their work in a way that feels right. So yeah, any closing statements, Vatic, before we wrap up?
Yeah, I just want to like, since we're still on that topic, I do want to just like highlight or uplift what you were saying around Sister Fire, like going to events and connecting in events, and then from there doing the lunch thing, like those are really good things. And understanding what you like and connecting to those through those councils, and there's some other city things, but yeah, as much as you can get off campus and like go and like experience humanity outside of campus, that's going to be great. My closing statement is like, yeah, thank you everybody for being here and making this such a rich conversation. This is the first time we kind of spoke about it since we've had the initial launch. So we're still like working on how to have this conversation with, like outside of like a direct activist group of people, right? So we're going to continue to have this conversation. So like continue to stay tuned in with us, since you all have a stake here in Providence. So yeah, stay tuned and stay connected. How are you feeling, Shey?
I'm feeling really good. Yeah, this is super nice. Thank you, Judy and Soleil, and thank you, Eliza, for the space for us.
Yeah.
And then if you can just sign up to the MoralDocs webpage so you can keep connected to us. We're hopeful that we can do more work with Prism to do screenings and other things, but mostly just do more community organizing. Well, I mean, not more. What Prism and Sister Fire and all these other folks are doing like there, just to uplift, because that is the role of the project, to like make sure we can strengthen the work that they're doing. So,
And
yeah.
they're all really youth led, right? They're not just people of color led, but primarily younger folks, right? Sister Fire, and because this is where the current and future leaders are, and there's just interesting generational questions around that. How us middle-aged people can. It's the same thing. How we can be most supportive of sharing whatever expertise we have, while at the same time honoring the new generation who's going about doing things in different ways and in amazing ways.
Yeah, that's really important. They're all intergenerational. I'd say Prism, that they've built a very incredible, Prism and other folks from that network have built an incredible pipeline of their young people taking leadership roles. But it's still quite intergenerational.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely Sister Fire is led by Deetra Edwards, who is like an incredible artist organizer. Well, she wouldn't call herself an artist, but I think she's an artist. She's an organizer. She's an elder, although she's a young elder. But she's an incredible woman, very inspiring. She's a little bit older than us and has a lot of rich experience. Yeah, but we need to build those spaces of intergenerational exchange. That is huge, huge, huge. We can't heal if we don't have them.
Really fabulous to meet you all and see what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Judy. Yeah, thank you, Soleil. Thank you, Eliza. And yeah, just stay in touch, and just a pleasure to meet you both. Thank you for spending this time with us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Take good care.